of the Chinese president when he thought he called a Malaccan dilemma. What was behind it, basically, that a scenario can emerge where the Chinese means and access to the lines of communication slocks is deterred by the aggressive elements, and they were pointing towards the Indian elements there. Both India and China have enlarged their naval capabilities, and India started with a very ambitious program of Blue Water Navy that was also flagged as a very sensitive and critical development from the Pakistan side. Chinese, obviously, ability remains unmatched on the vis-a-vis the Indians. And interestingly, what is Pakistan's affair? China and Pakistan has always had a very indigenous naval presence in the waters. And our naval capabilities are very enlarged and also very much acknowledged because of the capacity and the workmanship of the Pakistan naval fleets. According to Indians, they believe, if you read the literature by Indians and their documents, they believe that Pakistan is siding with China through CPEC. Obviously, the Gawadar is the nerve center of that. And Pakistan, through its waters and its means, are enlarging the ambit of Chinese influence in that area. And they feel very nerved that there is now a two-war situation that India might face coming because of a cooperation between China and Pakistan. Now, how China and Pakistan perceives it, this is also very interesting to note. Why Chinese are concerned, first, 40% of Chinese trade goes through the Indian Ocean. One is that. Other important element that has been added to this whole prism is the presence of US. That is a very, very major actor in the Indian Ocean region. And US throwing its weight behind India, and sometimes analysts call it as a strategic signpost masters of the US, given India this role to play. So this is very unnerving for nervous element by the Chinese, and so does the Pakistan. Pakistan's basically point of view is, so does the Chinese, is that we should not be going, although on geostrategic on land, the hegemony remains a trademark of Indians' behavior. So in waters, it should not be a monopoly of one power, whether it is India or it is USA. For that purpose, Pakistan has been cooperating with China and also with other countries, very vibrant relationship, even with Turkey. And there is a regular dialogue, and Aman is a part of that one, where close to 40 countries are participating in that. Russia is also participating. So the aim is to have a sense of collective security at the sea level. So this is the primary aim, this is the primary stated aim of Pakistan, China, and other powers who are aligned with that. In the case of US, the India has also come up with this, and the US is also part of that, the quadrilateral relationship, where you have Australia, Japan, US, and India together. And so they want to quell any threats coming from China. Important part is, in the Indian Ocean region, you are facing 4 nuclear powers whose submarines are also documented. In case of Pakistan, it has not yet declared it. But India, China, and US. So this is a very threatening element. So I think I have taken quite a lot of time. I would like to conclude here is that Indian Ocean is a very, very classic case where you see the competition going on between China, India, China, Pakistan cooperation, US, India, cooperation, US-China competition, and Australia-Japan in cohort with India, the competition vis-a-vis others, and also the interrelations, intermesh between these countries. So this is very important, and the most important point is that Indians think that Indian Ocean is their India part. So this feeling of making Indian Ocean as an Indian-specific ocean or as their birthright, this has to be replaced, and only if this is replaced, you see more a collective responsibility and cooperative framework emerging in this part of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shabana. It was very insightful discussion from your side, and the points which you have raised about India's belief of about Indian Ocean being its own ocean, and then the emerging complicated sort of maritime politics which is going on in Indian Ocean. That is quite a thing about which we need to talk in detail, and I would request Dr. Azhar Ahmed to start his lecture or discussion, whatever you want to call it, sir. And Dr. Azhar Ahmed would talk about piracy in Indian Ocean region, challenges and way forward, because there are many kinetic and non-kinetic threats and challenges in the Indian Ocean region, in which piracy has emerged as the biggest threat for the trade and as well as the navies which are performing their duties in Indian Ocean region. Sir.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Thank you, Malia. I don't think I'm capable of lecturing this august audience, but I'll try to share my understanding of the subject. First of all, I think I should thank the Institute of Policy Studies as well for providing us, particularly me, this opportunity to speak on this subject. I think since the arrival of the COVID, this is the first time I'm speaking from this platform at least, so it's good to see life coming back to the normal. You can show the first slide. Ladies and gentlemen, generally the world over, and particularly in countries like Pakistan, we are not well aware of the maritime, and therefore happenings at sea do not resonate neither with our public nor with the media or even the government. And piracy is no exception. Events of piracy are very few, and they do not get the publicity they deserve. However, the year 2011 in Pakistan was an exception in this regard. Not only that the media gave full coverage to the phenomenon of piracy, it was literally talk of the town, and I think many in Pakistan first time heard of maritime piracy outside storybooks and movies. And of course, it was not only Pakistan, but the entire world was talking of the phenomenon, which was threatening international shipping, particularly in the Indian Ocean. However, after achieving its peak in 2012-13, the menace has gradually faded away, and today there is little talk of piracy in the Indian Ocean. In fact, during the last 2 years, I have not heard of any incident of piracy reported in our areas of interest. So it was a bit of surprise when I received the request to speak on the subject, which is not of contemporary interest and hardly a challenge of maritime security as far as Pakistan is concerned. But perhaps it's still on the agenda of Aman, so here we are, and I'll try to share my understanding of this issue. Let's start by defining the term piracy. Next. The generally accepted definition of piracy has to be the one contained in the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, where piracy is defined as, and I think you can see that, any illegal acts of violence or detention or any act of depredation committed for private ends by the crew or the passengers of a private ship or a private aircraft and directed, 1, on the high seas against another ship or aircraft or against persons or property on board such ship or aircraft. Number 2, against a ship, aircraft, person, or property in a place outside the jurisdiction of any state. I think someone in the audience has a mic on. Now, if you note 3 terms that have been highlighted on the definition. First, acts committed for private ends. So that absolves the acts committed for political ends. Then it has to be committed on the high seas outside the jurisdiction of any states. So which means, according to this definition, armed robberies against ships within the territorial seas are also excluded. And that is one of the reasons that many academicians and practitioners question the efficacy of this definition, because, as I said, it excludes armed robbery against ship in territorial waters, in internal waters, as well as in archipelagic waters, whereas they may be carried out on international shipping. Here I may add that in order to provide an overall view of the global threat posed by piracy and armed robbery against ships, since 1982, the International Maritime Organization has been issuing incident reports, both monthly as well as annual comprehensive reports. And even the reports submitted by International Maritime Organization on piracy, they include armed robbery within territorial waters, but they mention them separately under separate headings, international waters, territorial waters, to segregate the two of them. However, due substantial decline in piracy, as I mentioned, since May 2018, the International Maritime Organization has stopped issuing monthly reports, and now they only issue a comprehensive report annually. Piracy, ladies and gentlemen, or the marine piracy, is perhaps as old as the time that mankind first ventured onto the sea, and it may even be fair to say that piracy is one of the oldest crimes known to humanity. Traditionally, the term piracy only implies attacking and robbing ships, but as you can see from the definition just cited, you'll have to wait for me. Aap pehle chale jate ho aage. Now, such acts against aircraft have also been included, and then you have also heard of the term used in software piracy. So piracy has got extended meaning in nowadays world. The great Greek historian Plutarch wrote in the 1st century CE. Next slide, please. Pirates are those who attack on sea and coastal land without legal authority. So here you can see the traditional difference from the definition that I showed earlier, that the traditional definition included the coastal land, but here is a very interesting thing which says without legal authority, which means that traditionally there has been legal authority also available to piracy. And therefore, historically, states saw the pirates as enemies, potential allies, or criminals. We have the examples where one state saw them as criminals while the other celebrated them as heroes. Some countries in Europe are still celebrating Pirate Day. For example, in Germany, Klaus Stortbaker is celebrated as a hero, and his statues are displayed in a number of North German cities. We also know Barbarossa, who is revered as a hero amongst the Muslims and as a great admiral of the Turkish fleet. However, majority of European historians call him a pirate. So it has remained a matter of perception as to who is the beneficiary and who is the victim. I'm sure most of you have also seen the movie Pirates of Caribbean, and we all love it. It's a 6-series movie. So that is how pirates are sometimes celebrated as heroes. Pirates are also used as privateers, serving their own enrichment and the military aims of their sponsors. And this I'll link with the Indian Ocean piracy shortly. The ancient and relatively recent approach to pirates is to view them as enemy combatants engaged in military attacks against the state and its constituents. This approach continued till the beginning of the 20th century. In general, states in the 21st century do not view pirates as enemies or allies, but rather as criminals. However, we find the Somalian pirates were used as proxies and or as privateers. इसको skip कर दें. There is this interesting story from Greek history that Alexander asked a captured pirate, "How dare he molest the sea?" The pirate responded, "How dare you molest the whole world? Because I do it with a little ship only, I'm called a thief. You doing it with a great navy are called an emperor." So modern piracy is synonymous with Somali piracy, which thrust into public eye, as I said, somewhere in 2007-2008. It was a fact of modern life, costing the world economy from $7 to $12 billion annually. And the cost was not only limited to economics, but also human, environmental, and political. So coming back to what happened in Pakistan that brought piracy into attention. A ship called MV Suez was hijacked by the pirates off the coast of Aden in 2010. Although it was not a Pakistani ship, but the captain of the ship and 4 of the crew members belonged to Pakistan. And after months of detention, when the ship's owners refused to pay ransom, the captain contacted his family back home in 2011, and from there the media and the Ansar Barni Trust took up the matter. The governor of Sindh showed his interest, and finally the negotiations were carried out with the captives, and the crew was released after paying about $2.3 million, of which $1.3 million was raised by the family of the captain from within Pakistan. That was the time when most of us became aware of the horrors of modern piracy. And this was the time when I got involved in this, because just after the saga concluded, some foreign institutions desired to have an international conference in Pakistan using the sentiments and the experience of the Pakistanis. And somehow I was asked to coordinate the conference, which was held in February 2012 in Karachi. And there I learned a few things firsthand from the captain of the ship which was captured and some other people who have been involved in the operation. So most of the time we are not aware of the facts. Next slide, please. People have identified 3 business models of modern piracy: kidnap and ransom, stealing the vessel and its cargo, or robbing valuables from vessels in short raids. And next, these are the conditions which are required by piracy to thrive. It requires a safe haven on land, access to the sea, and a weak or corruptible government. And this is very important for us. This should also have been highlighted here. Let's now discuss the origin and modalities of Somali piracy, because that is the only piracy we know in the Indian Ocean. Rest, according to our legal definition, are armed robberies that happen mostly around the coast of Gujarat in India and rarely of Bangladesh, but the hotspots are around the Malacca Strait and Indonesian archipelago. Various UN bodies and independent analysts agree with many local actors that nexus between hazardous waste dumping and illegal fishing prompted Somali piracy. Whereas waste dumping took place secretly in remote overland and maritime spaces, often under the cover of darkness, illegal fishing happened routinely, sometimes in broad daylight on and off near the Somali coast. At least since the collapse of the Somali state in the early 1991, illegal fishers plundered the country's marine resources. Illegal dumping and the intensity and methods of foreign illegal and local fishing destroyed the marine habitat, contributed to the deterioration of the quality and quantity of the catch, and further eroded the long-term sustainability of Somali fisheries. Somalis directly observed and experienced the damages such illegal fishing and waste dumping caused to their environment, and took the defense of their coastline and waters into their own hands and started confronting the foreign illegal vessels. Within a decade, their impromptu defensive measures took a life of its own and became the epic predatory enterprise of ransom piracy of the 21st century. From grievance to greed. But this is only part of the picture, shown to us mostly by the West. To actually understand the phenomenon, we need to look a little bit at the history of Somalia. In 1969, the elected president, Abdul Rashid Ali, was assassinated and military took over, who earlier aligned with the USSR and later with the United States of America. General Syed, who took over the government, was later ousted by the famous Farah Aidid. I think you have all heard of him, in 1991. Progressive erosion of the Somali state during the military regime, the country's descent into a bitter civil war in the late 80s, and the disintegration of its government in 91 did not augur well to the safety and security of maritime navigation in its waters. Civil war in Somalia provided opportunity for, as discussed earlier, the use of Somali waters for illegal fishing and dumping of hazardous material, and the rise of local fishermen in defense. But in addition to that, what is seldom spoken of, the foreign powers used the various landlords, warlords as proxies to bring a regime favorable to them in Somalia. Thus, they not only ignored, but in some instances actually encouraged piracy by these warlords. These warlords used the pirates to earn money, smuggle weapons, and use them against their rivals. So piracy actually flourished because of support from some Western powers, and I'll come back to that later. This is a case similar to that of the Afghanistan. The poppy culture is controlled when Taliban are there, and it rises further when the American-led forces invade Afghanistan. Similarly, in Somalia also, if we note in 2006, for a short period when Islamic Courts Union was in control of the territory, the piracy was immediately controlled. But as soon as Somalia was taken over by Western-backed forces, the piracy again flourished. So you can understand the reasons. You'll be surprised to know that whenever a ship was hijacked, the first call to the owners of the ship was usually not from the pirates or hijackers, but from a middleman from UAE or London offering the owner the services to negotiate with the pirates. And if you don't ask me the source, I can tell you authentic intelligence that most of those middlemen belonged to MI6, the British intelligence. They were former or serving operators of MI6. Traditionally, Somali pirates have operated from small boats waiting up to 50 nautical miles off the coast for a suitable vessel to attack, but as patrols have pushed them further out, they started using bigger trawlers as motherships. The ability of pirates to locate target vessels in vast expanse of sea has led some to conclude that pirates are being provided with GPS coordinates by informants with access to ship tracking data. Crews of some hijacked vessels have said that the pirates appear to know everything about the ship on boarding, from the layout of the vessel to its ports of call. Calls made by pirates from their satellite phones from captured ships indicate an international network. According to Captain Wasi Hassan of the captured ship, he had a crew of 23, but one person could not sail with the ship and was dropped at the last moment, and the pirates kept torturing them to find that one person who was missing there because they had details of 23 people on board. Whatever money they earn, only a portion of the ransom money goes to the pirates. Government officials and the armed groups that control different parts of the country may also be taking a share, though the precise amount is unknown. According to one breakdown, the pirates involved in the actual hijacking receive only 30% of the ransom, out of which they must cover their expenses. The armed groups who control the territory where the pirates are based may claim perhaps 10% as a tax, and elders and officials command a similar share. The financier of the operation may take 20% as interest on the funds advanced with a full sponsor claiming perhaps 30%. According to a convicted pirate, a single armed pirate can earn anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 for a 1 million ransom ship. This is approximately 2 to 3 years worth of salary of an armed guard at a humanitarian agency, and much higher than what a local business would pay. The number of acts of piracy and armed robbery against ships which were reported to the International Maritime Organization in 2019 were about 193. And the areas most affected by the piracy and armed robbery are West Africa, the Straits of Malacca and Singapore, South China Sea, South American Pacific region, South American Caribbean region, and as you can see, Indian Ocean had the minimum of the incidents, and none of them Somali piracy. And out of these 10 incidents, only one happened in the international waters of Indonesia. 7 of them actually happened on the anchorage.
These are figures for 1 year.
These are the figures of only 2019. As I said, they issue now annual reports. The annual report of 2020 is still awaited, but I have gone through their monthly reports. There is, again in 2020, also there is no reported piracy in the Somali region, only these armed robberies off the Malacca coast and a couple of them off the Gujarat coast of India. Now coming to the second part of the requirement, the way forward. Now, although I have said it's not of an imminent threat because it is not happening, and one thing perhaps that I forgot to mention is that the pirates were also smart enough not to attack any national shipping. So they were only attacking selected ships of private companies. But once it has happened, it may happen again, and we should be prepared for that. So what are the measures that can be taken? Okay, this is starting from the measures. This is, again, as I mentioned, the former president of Somalia, he had noted that you cannot tackle piracy from the sea, no matter how many naval ships you put into the waters. The best way to actually fight the piracy is to tackle these things from the land. And so, from my point of view, as it is my point of view for many other ills, I think we have to start from improving the governance. In my opinion, the panacea to all ills is political stability and good governance. But some specific measures that can be taken as far as maritime security is concerned, and these measures are not limited to piracy, but they will help achieve overall maritime security. For example, the role and capacity building of Maritime Security Agency and Coast Guard be enhanced so that they can be used as primary agency dealing with maritime security issues. Intensified patrols in the respective area of responsibility with an emphasis on maritime support operations, including maritime interdiction operations. Setting up of command and control centers with appropriate equipment and the force to respond to contingencies such as armed hijackings and piracy. Integrated surveillance and information network for tracking and investigating suspicious movements. Random escorts of high-value merchant vessels plying the dangerous straits and adjacent waters. Of course, it will be required when there is a threat, but we have to keep practicing these, and the Navy keeps doing that. Redesignation of shipping routes to minimize the convergence of small craft with high-risk merchant vessels. Improved ship tracking devices. And last but not the least, international and national security standards and programs such as International Ship and Port Facility Security Code be implemented effectively. Now, to conclude, over the past 200 years, humanity has undertaken many joint initiatives in almost every field: health, education, communication, even the unprecedented cooperation between more than 190 states under the banner of the United Nations. Never before history have we had such a large number of treaties, conventions, rules and regulations to enforce order, discipline and cohesion on this planet. And yet we find that in the 21st century, marine piracy makes a virtual mockery of this 200 years of phenomenal progress. This illustrates the incredible vulnerability of our systems, in some cases very complicated systems, which we need to improve. Maritime regimes need to be developed to bring order to the oceans and seas of the region. Maritime cooperation is a major component of the regime building process and is essential for the effective management of regional seas, especially marine environmental protection, marine safety, resource management, and preventing illegal activities at sea. And before leaving, I want to leave a slide which quotes the captain of that ill-fated ship, the Pakistani captain, and I'll just leave it for you to read it and try to understand how such criminal activity takes place at such a scale in the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Azhar Ahmed. It was indeed very thought-provoking and interesting presentation given by you. And when you talk about business models of piracy, at times it was so tempting for everyone. And yes, the way forward which you have mentioned as improving governance and capacity building of law enforcement agencies and enhancing security, maritime security basically, that was quite needed in this domain. And whenever we talk about the concept of maritime security and the environment which is full of challenges, we need to talk about the mechanism of providing security to the littoral states. And for that, I would like to invite Dr. Khurram Iqbal, and he will talk about mechanism of collaborative security in maritime domain. Dr. Khurram Iqbal, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I hope I am also audible to the audience.
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. First of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Khalid Rahman, Director, IPS. It's good to see Admiral Iftikhar Rao as a keynote, and of course, my co-panelists, Professor Shabana Fayaz, Dr. Azhar, who have comprehensively covered different dimension of the topic that we are discussing today. Professor Shabana Fayaz spoke about the increasing major power competition in the Indian Ocean. Dr. Azhar Ali's talk on the root causes behind the piracy was, of course, incisive. It was quite insightful. And I would like to build on the argument and discussion that they have both presented. And in the next 10 to 15 minutes, I would argue that Aman 21, it's a vivid reflection of Pakistan's long-term commitment for collaborative security on the land as well as in the sea. This commitment comes at a time when Indian Ocean is increasingly becoming the hotspot or epicenter of the major power competition. If you look at the history of Pakistan for last good 74 years, we have been on the receiving end of the major power rivalry in our backyard. And when I say backyard, I'm referring to Afghanistan, where first during the Cold War, Pakistan suffered immensely because of the Cold War, which turned hot in Afghanistan between the Soviet Union and United States of America. Of course, nobody pushed us to be a part of American camp. It was a well thought out decision or an end, but the repercussions, the fallout was immense. The second episode that profoundly shaped Pakistani state and society, that was in the post-2001, when again the elephant was in the room, United States intervening in Afghanistan with a UN mandate to fight against terrorism. For last 20 years, which is almost, of course, 2 decades, we have been suffering the fallout. And thanks to conscious efforts of Pakistan, the backyard is cooling off with different factions coming on the negotiation table and trying to resolve the Afghan issue. But as the backyard cools off, we are seeing that our waters are heating up. Increasing competition between China and US, which was limited to Asia Pacific, has now extended to Indian Ocean region, and resultantly the third largest of the world's oceanic divisions, which for centuries has served as a zone of peace, is now transforming into a zone of conflict, not mainly because of piracy and terrorism, but mainly because of the major power competition in the Indian Ocean. From a Pakistani perspective, I would say of particular concern for us is the Indian ambition to dominate the Indo-Pacific theater in a Cold War bloc-style competition. And this Indian ambition, this Indian intent is of course not without American approval. 3 to 4 weeks ago, the White House declassified the strategic framework of the American Indo-Pacific strategy, which clearly and vocally talks about patronizing India to counter rising China. So what we are seeing now, that India, which historically prided itself as strategically autonomous, has now become the most important pawn of American grand chess in Asia. And how the newly elected president of the United States of America deals with India, whether he will continue the same Trumpian style patronage of India or he would introduce some changes, that is anybody's guess. But as this clash of titans unfolds in Indian Ocean, we in Pakistan, we are confronted yet again with hard choices. Either we have to take side, or we can also decide to serve as a bridge. A number of indicators suggest that Pakistan has opted for the later option, which is to serve as a bridge in an increasingly polarizing world and in an increasingly polarizing Indian Ocean region. What we see is that Pakistan is basically trying to establish a niche for itself as a bridge between different rivals who apparently are now vying for influence in 2 different camps or the blocs. And this commitment of Pakistan for collaborative security, or to basically serve as a bridge, let's acknowledge it's not new. Going back to 1950s, just only a few years after the inception of Pakistan, Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan is on record offering a no-war declaration with India as early as in 1950s. And of course, and President Ayub also offered a joint or collective defense treaty with India, provided the issue of Kashmir is resolved. But of course, Indian response to Pakistan's peace overtures was not encouraging, to say the least. In maritime domain, my co-panelist, Dr. Azhar, he mentioned about the declining number of piracy incidents. Let us acknowledge that this decline or dramatic decline was not without conscious international efforts, of which Pakistan was a critical participant or a critical part. When in the first and second decade of 21st century, the incidence of piracy and maritime terrorism increased, Pakistan joined number of international maritime initiatives, such as US-led Combined Maritime Force in the Indian Ocean region. Then Pakistan also had the honor to command the Combined Task Force 150 for 11 times and Combined Task Force 151 for 9 times since its inception. So these two task forces, of course, were largely mandated to fight piracy and maritime terrorism. Of course, it's an academic forum, and we can agree to disagree. Dr. Azhar has mentioned that at a time when piracy is on record low or is non-existent, whether there is a need for a naval exercise which exclusively focus on piracy. Well, one major factor, of course, of piracy and terrorism in our part of the world has been major power competition. And I believe on the land, the characteristic of terrorism is changing, so it will in the Indian Ocean as well. Piracy, as rightly pointed out by him, there was a strong connection between the incidents of piracy and the geopolitical interests of the big, large countries, influential countries. That interest is increasing as they embark on containing China. So I believe as the major power competition in the Indian Ocean increases, these gains that we have made against piracy and terrorism, they can be reversed, because major powers have a tendency to utilize non-state actors on the land and in the sea to basically complement their geostrategic agenda. When we talk about terrorism, yes, there was one terrorist organization, Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam in Sri Lanka, which had one of the most formidable maritime wing, which they used to target the Sri Lankan government. The group has been dismantled in 2008, and since then, other terrorist organizations, they have shown no interest in developing maritime capacity. But as we see that the character of terrorism is changing on the land, it will also reflect in the sea as well. And what is that change in the characteristic of terrorism? Specifically in South Asian context, after 2001, we would say that there was a time of ideological terrorism where a number of organizations, they competed for influence, they operated with an ideological agenda. But that element of ideology is now being overshadowed by proxyism. We are seeing that terrorist organizations which were previously fighting for an ideology, they are increasingly being used by a number of countries, including India, to complement their geostrategic agenda. So if that's the case, there is a possibility that the threat of maritime terrorism in the Indian Ocean still persists, and it may increase as the major power competition also increase in the Indian Ocean. So against this backdrop, it is very important to keep our coast and territorial waters safe, not only from major power competitions, but also from non-traditional security threats such as piracy and terrorism. And when Pakistan securitizes sea, its drive to tap into the potential of Indian Ocean, it is driven by human security paradigm, where economy and cooperation, they take precedent over high politics. And this is vividly reflected by the mandate and scope of Aman 2021. And at the forefront of this securitization of ocean from a non-traditional angle is Pakistan Navy, which is taking the lead to offer different countries a platform in the Indian Ocean to basically chip in their resources to fight against the threats that endanger the security of all of us. Only a few days away, I think what is unprecedented in terms of its scope is the participation of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, which on one hand would serve to augment the increasingly strengthening relations of Pakistan and Russia. On the other hand, it would also provide Russia a platform to work together with other navies coming from NATO. And this is after, I guess, 10 years that Russian Navy would be a part of a naval exercise along with the NATO navies since 2001, when they all participated in the Bold Monarch 2001 on the coast of Spain. So to conclude, I would say that the threat of piracy and terrorism persists in Indian Ocean. It will accelerate as the major power competition in Indian Ocean accelerates. So therefore, there's a need that Pakistan serves as a bridge between different countries, not only to diffuse the negative fallout of major power competition, but also to fight these non-traditional security issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khurram. Now I would request Sir Iftikhar Ahmed Rao. No, sir. After you. I would request you to sum up all this discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, we had good talks from the three learned speakers and who elaborated on all the three subjects very comprehensively. In the first one, the competition and cooperation. In fact, competition and cooperation goes on all along, as the Americans also say that there's engagement and containment of China. That is, they keep talking about engaging the Chinese into activities and also trying to contain the Chinese. But it can get very dangerous when it comes to, in case it turns to confrontation. So we hope that confrontation doesn't take place. And because of the US support of India in this region, as many speakers have mentioned about it, the Indians keep floating various bogeys about the China threat, like the term string of pearls, etc., which Chinese have always denied that there is nothing such as a string of pearls strategy, but they are securing their interest in, along with the developing various ports, Kavadar, Hambantota, and the rest of them, to secure their trade route. And it has got nothing to do with the military aspects. And Indian hegemonic designs are very clear, not only that we say so, it is documented in their own documents. In the Indian Maritime Doctrine of 2004, it clearly mentions that the Indian Navy must control the choke points, and they say the control of the choke points will give them a big edge in the international maritime diplomacy. So the hegemonic design, that's what creates problems for collaboration in this region. An Australian writer himself said that, as it was mentioned, that Indians are trying to make Indian Ocean as their own ocean. In fact, he termed that Indian Ocean, they want to remove the N and put apostrophe S and put as India's Ocean. So that is where the problem lies, and that is one of the reasons that this IORA, which was previously ARC, that the Indians do not let Pakistan to be participate in it, despite Australians trying it and all the rest of the countries trying it. They do not let Pakistanis to be part of that. So that is one major reason. Similar case like SARC, they do not want anything to happen, whichever thing can help Pakistan benefit Pakistan, so they would not like that to happen. So that hegemonic design and anti-Pakistan sentiment, that is affecting the entire region, and that is affecting the Indian Ocean region also, especially the West Indian Ocean. The US, of course, for its own interest, is trying to prove, as Khurram also mentioned, to support India so that it can contain China. But my own perception is, and having been in China for a few years, that it is impossible for India to compete with China or to contain China. They can, and the Americans can keep trying as hard as they want to, and they will never have India supporting their motives or their strategic interests, Indians will always try to take their own advantage wherever they can, but they will not go all out to confront China because they know their limitations. And the Squad thing, of course, is getting momentum, and these regular exercises, etc. And because of this Squad, the four countries' collaboration, especially around Malacca Strait, and that is why it was Hu Jintao mentioned the Malacca dilemma. So this problem is there, and mostly India is trying to pose itself as a big regional power, at least in the maritime field, and which is a big navy, no doubt, but to be a real regional maritime power or to confront China, it is a long, long way to go for India, and in the foreseeable future, I personally don't foresee India to be able to do that, but it will keep trying so that it can keep getting more and more support from the US. Then Dr. Azhar talked about piracy. Piracy, ladies and gentlemen, of course, has been, as he mentioned, that it has been since the time immemorial. In fact, there is a Malaysian saying that the first boat that was ever built was to catch fish, and the second boat was to attack that boat and take the fish away from him. So the piracy is really old, and it was mentioned that Alexander was confronted by that pirate that I am doing this as a small boat, so I'm called. This is true. And not only that, pirates were so strong in those days and supported by the relative governments, etc., that this famous Julius Caesar, this Roman Julius Caesar, he was also captured by the pirates, and he remained under the pirates for quite some time. This is a separate thing. This once he was released on ransom. He had to pay ransom, and after he was released, then he raised a fleet of own and then raided those pirates' hideout. And as it was said that they must be confronted on land, so their whole base and all the pirates were actually finished off, and they were all killed. But he was captured by the pirates, that's how it is. And pirates, this western part, they keep talking about it. They actually made them heroes. Buccaneers, privateers, all these fashionable names. This is what they're given on this, or the pirates of the Indies that was mentioned. You see, the Spanish were looting the wealth of the South America, and their ships were bringing all that wealth, gold and silver and everything else, to Spain. And these Britishers and the French, they would, their pirates or their privateers or buccaneers as they called them, they would attack those Spanish ships and get hold of it and come back. And one of the pirates, when he came back, and of course they were given a marquee, they were given a letter that whosoever is getting this letter, so he is authorized to capture any ship. And there was an agreement that once they reach, the government will get so much, in fact, almost 50%, and then that admiral or whosoever is a pirate leader, he will get the rest. So that is the kind of piracy that had been supported. And the queen, one of the pirates, she went to the pirate ship herself and knighted him. So that's the kind of thing that is going on, and the same phenomena, as Dr. Azhar very kindly, correctly mentioned, that the Somalian pirates, those small little kids who were sitting there with the rifle, etc., were they negotiating? Where were the negotiations take place? They talk about this FATF thing that they are talking about Pakistan, that terrorism, terror financing, etc., etc. Where is this money trail of all the finance trail of all these pirates going? In which banks is this money going? And where are the negotiations taking place? All these, London and Dubai and the rest of the places. So if they really want to control it, that's what it is. But physically how it was controlled, of course, once it got out of hand, was, of course, as Dr. Khurram also mentioned, that the joint operation by the world navies. And this Task Force 151 was specifically made against the piracy. And of course, Pakistan was part of it, and Pakistan has commanded it also many times. And this definition, as Dr. Azhar mentioned, the definition is very cleverly made, that it is for private ends. In case it is not for private end, it is for political end, for the government end, for those marquee, etc. So it is not piracy. So you can't charge him. And similarly, in the previous days, they used to raid the coastal cities also, coastal towns also, and capture them. Now, in this definition, that is out. That is not piracy. And this piracy, terrorism, or all these crimes out at sea, they intermingle. They are interlinked. So they have to be dealt with together. So this keeping it in the Aman 21 also makes sense because it has not finished all those things. One thing is finished, the second thing takes over. And this piracy also, because there was so much of force, actually navies present over there presence of the naval ships so much, so they would like, and like any dacoit, etc., they would like to go for a place which is least defended. So this piracy basically has shifted to west coast of Africa, or gone towards the further east towards the Malacca Strait, which in fact it started from Malacca, etc., this recent one, and then it had come to the Somalia. So it is not finished, and this collaborative action is the only answer, and which has to be taken by all these navies, and this Aman is one such action that needs to be taken. And Dr. Khurram mentioned about the collaborative security, of course, and he said that Pakistan in this geostrategic scenario of competition, you can say, between the US, China, and India, all this, Pakistan should act as a bridge between these, and of course should not wholeheartedly join one group or the other. And that is, in my view, the best solution for Pakistan. And this is what Pakistan has been doing in the past also. Just to give you the background of this Aman exercise also, that as you all know, that in 2001, when there was this, after this 9/11 situation, and when the Americans came here and their naval forces in all this area, I was in Navy at that time. I was also involved in some of these things. So every morning there used to be a conference here, the Americans and the Pakistani, all three services, for deconfliction, especially at sea. Because at sea, the US aircraft were flying, our aircraft were flying. Our ships were present, US ships were present. So especially from the air point of view, it was always a confusion that in case, let's say our Atlantic aircraft, at that time we had Atlantics, our Atlantic aircraft is going, it is capable of carrying missiles. So if it is getting very close to the US ships, so they might think it as a threat and they might attack this. So to deconflict, okay, you will come only up to this latitude or longitude and not below this height, and you will. So every morning there used to be a conference over here. So there was this situation of almost confrontation kind of thing. But it was, alhamdulillah, there was no incident of that. Then we started discussing with the Americans that what are you trying to do with all these forces over here in this region, this North Arabian Sea, or especially off our coast. This is our coast, it is our main interest. And our main interest is that no untoward incident should take place over here. And that is what you also want. So why confront? Why not collaborate? And then we started talking with them that, okay, for collaboration, how to collaborate, etc. One example we gave them was that their P3C aircraft, surveillance aircraft, they used to operate from Bahrain. I said they take off from Bahrain, they come over here, they waste some of the time, they try to control or talk to the fishermen, etc., those who are operating. They are speaking in English, in American accent, to the fishermen of this region. Nobody understands each other. They pass around time, whatever they can monitor, and go back, and you put a tick on your chart that we have done so many hours 8 hours of surveillance. And net result is you have not been able to gain much information. we suggested to them, we had by that time two P3Cs which were non-operational because of restrictions since '92. They said, release them, make them operational, give them additional P3Cs, we will operate from here. And this we can have an arrangement whereby we can collaborate whatever actual information is, we can share the information. So collaborate with each other rather than confront with each other. So eventually, slowly and gradually, these things got built up. And then we decided to join Pakistan government after deliberations and ministries level and all the government agencies, etc. involved. Then in 2004, we joined as it was called at that time, CMCP, Combined Maritime Coalition Force. That's what it used to be called at that time. We joined that, and that was eventually Task Force 150. Then, after 2 years or so, we bidded for the command of the task force, and there was a lot of reluctance to give command to the Pakistani, because Pakistan is the only regional country in Task Force 150. Otherwise, they're all Western navies or Japan and others. So when they were giving up, there was a lot of reluctance, but eventually we got the command, and when we commanded, Pakistan Navy commanded Task Force 150 for the first time, Dr. Jeffrey Till had written an article that this is a test case. And that test case was so successful, alhamdulillah, as Dr. Khudam mentioned, we commanded it 11 times, we are still part of it. Even now, one of the admirals is in Bahrain commanding one of the task forces. And then when Task Force 151 was raised, which was later for primarily for piracy of Somalia, so Pakistan Navy joined that also. And once we developed so much of understanding and interacted with all these navies, so from 2004 to 2007, then from 2007 onwards, we started this Aman exercise, and alhamdulillah, it is graduating into a international, really big event biennially that we hold it. So alhamdulillah, the Pakistan Navy is doing a great job. In fact, I keep saying that they are punching much beyond their own weight. They need much of the government support and the public support to carry out their own missions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. In the environment full of friction and traditional and non-traditional security threats like robberies, piracy, seaborne smuggling, trafficking, and even illegal fishing, terrorism, including cyber terrorism, which has emerged as a strong threat in this region. I believe that organizing this exercise, Aman 21 by Pakistan, is very right step in the right direction. At this point of this seminar, I want to thank all the participants which are here through internet, through this Zoom link, and especially I want to mention few names, and I want to thank them all, as we have Vice Admiral Asif Humayun with us, Ms. Farzana Yaqoob, Dr. Najam Abbas, Ms. Nagmana Zafar, Kanwar Javed Iqbal from NEMA, Babar Bhatti Sahab, Anila Shehzad, Dr. Parvez Mahesar from Sindh University, Dr. Bashir Bahar from International Islamic University, and there are several other participants coming from Karachi University. And Admiral Salim Akhtar Saab is also here. Thank you very much, sir. I'm sorry, sir. And we have participants from Federal Urdu University of Arts, Science and Technology, Islamia University, Bahawalpur, and Rifai University. Thank you everyone. And now I think this is the right time to proceed towards question answer session. From where we will start? Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Maliha. As you have rightly mentioned that the objectives of this Aman 2021 exercise is not only about maritime security cooperation against piracy, but all other non-traditional security threats as well. And I was wondering if Zaram, a very bright officer from Pakistan Navy and an expert in cyber security and satellite security is here, and if he would like to enlighten us about this aspect and also how Aman 2021 is dealing with it. I think the role of maritime policing by organizations like Pakistan Maritime Security Agency against stopping illegal drug trade, which is Gawada and Pakistan's coastline is not only the hub of 40% of oil traffic, seaborne oil trade, but also I think the illegal drugs like all being produced from opium and heroin and the new names we hear, they are also going there, and PMSA is doing a wonderful job. And this has to grow, and more collaboration between other maritime policing forces and paramilitary forces like PMSA is critical to get rid of this menace in the region. Even in the illegal fishing, they are playing a very important role, more than the fisheries department. And I would like to hear from any respected speaker or from the participants about the threats of environmental terrorism or disaster in which navies and these maritime policing forces can play a role, and how Aman is seeing this aspect. My last question is about this task forces of 150, 151. Commander Bilal Atiq is here. He was part of these forces. So Pakistan is no more part of these forces now. And was there a cost-benefit analysis of this decision of Pakistan? Was it made to retreat from the forces, or was it only about the fuel cost which they offered to, or they asked us to bear to be part of it, and we refrained from it? So I would like anyone to explain the reasons. And Pakistan is no more part of these task forces now, I think. Yes. Bilal? 150 and 151?
I'm really not correct on this.
No, we have one admiral there now.
Acha, okay.
We have left one of them, but we are still part of it.
Okay, then, okay, fine. So is there a cost-benefit analysis of being part of these task forces? And
That was political. It had nothing to do with anything else.
Cost benefit, let me explain. Because once we joined CMCP, that was the first thing. So at the time of joining, rest of the countries, those who were participating in Task Force 150, everybody was funding their own, obviously. In principle, after joining all these things, joining the group, they had to take permission from their Congress and Japanese and everybody else having all those approvals, and we were part of it. Then we said we do not have enough budget to participate regularly. We can't provide ships on regular basis for such long times because we have very limited budget. So eventually, then we were compensated for our participation. And what is that fund called? Joint Coalition Fund. So as part of that coalition fund, we used to be refunded. And some of the elements like fuel was arranged by the Japanese. At that time, Japanese tanker used to be operating. Later they had withdrawn, then there was some other arrangement. So Japanese tanker used to fuel our ships. That was without charge, of course. Then later we needed that feed water, as we call them, for the ships, we need feed water. Then the feed water, again, when we asked the Japanese, everybody had to ask their own government, their parliament, etc., etc. So eventually feed water also. So these things were being taken care of that way. And then our expenses, the key expenses were shared through the coalition, joint coalition fund. Although whether Navy got anything out of that coalition fund or not, and that is a separate story.
I've just been told that we are still commanding 151, but we had to leave 150.
I think after this Salala incident and all that, when we fell off with the United States, we withdrew as a protest from Task Force 150, but because 151 was particularly for maritime security and piracy, we remained in that, and we are still part of that.
Sir Asaf Humayun.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Very nice discussions I heard, and I like to first of all say I'm very happy to be part of this seminar, and I happened to be the Commander Pakistan Fleet when the first Aman 2007 took place. It was a great experience, and unlike, for example, Malabar, when you look at Malabar exercise, it is meant to bring navies together to exercise the traditional role of the Navy, that is sea control, sea surveillance, sea dominance, those kind of things. Unlike those exercises, the purpose of Aman is to bring navies together to meet the non-traditional threats. It is not meant to exercise sea control or sea denial, etc., etc. Okay, and piracy is just one non-traditional threat. The other non-traditional threats are, for example, oil spills at sea, searching for missing vessels, controlling illegal fishing, etc., etc., and they are very much part of the menu, or what I would say, agenda of Aman exercise. Secondly, I would say that Aman brings together really many navies which on the face of it are rivals in the ocean. For example, the Chinese will come in, the British will come in, the Russians will come in as in this exercise. So the purpose of Aman is actually to bring navies together so that they sort out their intercommunication and things like, for example, in first Aman, we had an issue with some of the ships which were participating. Those ships could either do 7 knots, 12 knots, 80 knots, and nothing in the middle. So, when you get ships like that, it is difficult to maneuver at sea, to coordinate sea, and that is the purpose of Aman exercise. Piracy is, as rightly pointed out, is no more a dominant threat in either Arabian Sea or Western Indian Ocean. And more we are seeing that, for example, in August 2020, the biggest non-traditional threat in Western Indian Ocean was the oil spill of Mauritius. And it was in spite of all the navies getting together and the people coming right from South Africa, India going in, and French going in, they could not manage that pollution, and there was substantial amount, about 2,000 tons of amount was spilled, and which affected the coral reefs of Mauritius. That ship, for example, was not supposed to be sailing on that course at all. And if there was, joint, what we can call the maritime domain awareness, that ship could have been, directed not to take that route. So these are the things which we try and address in Aman. That is what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
And before proceeding further, I want to thank one more part of this discussion, the participants which are very much here, and I have received a message. that people are here, the naval officers which are from Pakistan Navy Staff College and officers from headquarters and field. And Sir Khalid Rahman, with your permission, I want to say something, pardon me for Urdu here. ये बख्तवर, ये बाहुनर, ये शेर दिल है जिनके दम से मुस्तकिल ये साहिलों की रोशनी, ये आंगनों की जिंदगी, ये हौसलों के नामावर, ये अजमतों के तर्जुमा, ये समंदरों के पासबा। ये आप सबके लिए जिनकी वजह से हम यहाँ पे ये इवेंट कर रहे हैं। बहुत शुक्रिया।
आज से हम भी समंदरों के पास
जी, नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन प्लीज।
Can I ask a question? Neela Shehzad.
Yes, please.
First of all, I mean, it's a great pleasure to be a part of this webinar and to be listening to the esteemed speakers over here. My question is that when I was writing my paper on Indian maritime strategy and its implication in Pakistan, I read the 2015 Indian naval strategic document, in which they said that India envisions itself to be a net security provider of IOR. And in those times, I also read this thing that India is planning to spend over $6 billion in the next 10 years on its naval ships. And it's planning to make a fleet of over 160 ships. So I heard from all of you that US and China are two big forces that are trying to influence the IOR. But if India is going to do all this and is going to build up its navy, what is going to be the direct implication that it might have on our navy and on our country's strategic equation? Thank you.
Okay, our response, of course, one is that it has to be as per the design or as per the strategy of any country. We, for sure, because of our size and our economy and our strength, we cannot compete with India ship for ship, platform by platform, aircraft by aircraft. That is not possible, and that is not what we should be aiming at. India, as you rightly mentioned in their maritime strategy of 2015, they have gone even beyond that. Their areas of interest, as you must have read already, is that not only in this Indian Ocean region, their secondary areas of interest have gone to Mediterranean Sea, the west coast of Africa, and even to the Pacific. So their designs or their aims or ambitions are huge. And whether they will be able to achieve those aims and ambitions, that is very difficult. They also plan to have more than 3 aircraft carriers, and many people ask us that why can't we have a carrier? And my simple reply has been, while I was in service and even now, that even if somebody gives us an aircraft carrier free of cost, our economy will not be able to afford to even operate it. Per day expenses of aircraft carrier group are so huge that it's not possible for us. But at the same time, not that we can't have it, we don't need it. Aircraft carrier and such forces are basically aggressive weapons. What is the aim of aircraft carrier? To go take aircraft, it is a floating base, to take it to the place where your land-based aircraft cannot reach, so that these floating bases can go and operate over there. So that is what it is. We don't have any hegemonic designs. We don't have any aggressive designs against any other country, as the Maldives or East Coast of Africa or some other countries. So ours is to defend our own maritime interests, and that's all it is. And our Navy is designed that way. Our strategy is designed that way, and our development strategy is also that way. So we are not in direct competition with India from platform to platform or the development. They have so many submarines, so we will have those so many submarines. They have so many of aircraft carriers, we will also have it. We can't do that. And we must remember Soviet Union, that if you keep developing the armed forces like that, but unaware of what is the economic situation of the country, then it will collapse from within. And secondly, as I mentioned, that is not our need. Our need is only to defend our maritime interests, and for that, Navy's, that is what the naval development strategy is, and that's what we should be happy with it. Thank you.
At this point of discussion, I want to add one comment from Dr. Bashir Bahar, and he has mentioned a very rather encouraging thing, that he says that Pakistan has very important role in regard to educate the hundreds of Somalian students, as well as receiving thousands of Somalian refugees. That is such a strong thing on part of Pakistan, and I think this is one of the gestures which should be called as a strong gesture of diplomacy and foreign policy, basically. Yes, Kulsum, please.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is to Dr. Shabana Fayaz. If I'm not wrong, in early 1900s, Mahan proposed a theory, the crux of which was that whoever controls the Indian Ocean controls the world. So do you see this theory still holding true? And if it does, then which country do you see this prophecy coming true? My second question is that we are seeing that the world is increasingly turning into a multipolar world. So what kind of order do you see in the maritime region, especially in the Indian Ocean region? Do you see it becoming more cooperative, competitive, or conflictual? Thank you.
Hanji, thank you, Kulsum, for asking a very all-encompassing question, like the same that Shafaq gave me for a topic as well. It is interesting to see Mahan did said and professed that whoever controls the sea controls the world. He didn't only specify the Indian Ocean, although in some writings it is said it is Indian Ocean. This is one thing. I think very important, critical, as a strategic teacher, what we teach is that is the importance and the critical value of realizing the sea as an important power, as an important aspect of national power. The same applies to the air and to the land. But how and why one element of power dominates the other elements, that is very important to note. And in countries like developing states like Pakistan, we are more focused on land, but our air and naval-based strengths are also being augmented, to move on to the structures that we are witnessing these days. So this is one aspect. Who will ultimately rule the world, or there's going to be a one supreme power? I don't think so it's going to happen. At the moment, even in the changing structures that we are living in, the US still remains a major dominant player in the world's sea. It has certain vulnerabilities, it is facing certain challenges on ground as well as in other aspects, but overall, it still commands that. Well, the countries like China, Russia, and many other developing states, they want to perceive they are projecting the project of collaborative security, and Pakistan also believes in that. But whether it will be mature and what aspect, it is very interesting to see the collaboration in some aspects and dominance in other aspects. So this is also the behavior of even of China, Russia, and other countries as well. India is normally labeled as a hegemon by the South Asian, primarily by Pakistan and other smaller states as well. So this is one aspect. Now coming to what sort of the world we are going to live in, I think we are going to live in a very fractured world. There are going to be the spots of powers scattered around the sea, and also around the world. The economics is going to be the major determining factor. Who has more money and more fiscal power, they are going to have more influence. But then you can say there are countries like Japan who are fiscally very strong, but militarily are not infused with that strength. So this is a major combination. So I think your generation and will see a more fractured and a more competitive world.
Thank you very much.
We have Iftikhar Gilani Sahab also. So may I read out his question? Or okay, ठीक है.
We have one participant with us, Iftikhar Gilani Sahab. He is a Kashmiri journalist and he is now based in Turkey. Okay. Iftikhar Gilani Sahab wants to ask that in 2004, if I remember, US has offered India to become a core member of the Proliferation Security Initiative. What are its implications for Pakistan and region? We were also told in India that Indian Navy played a great role in Kargil crisis and then in other conflicts also encircling Pakistan. Can you throw some light on this and how Pakistan Navy confronts it?
Somehow I have become a naval spokesman.
You are.
During Kargil, their navy had no participation whatsoever except sailing around on the seas. And so were our navy also sailing around the sea. There was no interaction between the navies during the Kargil operation. And the only the biggest thing that they did was that they brought some of the boats, some small boats in the creek area, etc., but there was no action that took place. Although after that, after the Kargil situation, very cowardly, they attacked our Atlantic aircraft. I happen to be an aviator, so let me explain this Atlantic shooting down incident completely. Atlantic aircraft, because this Kargil situation and everything else had completely finished and it was a normal peacetime, we go for various flying practices on daily basis. Our flying area, for practice areas, is, if you are familiar with or you can see on the map, near Gharo. Gharo is one point, and then it goes towards the Mirpur Sakro, and that area is generally the practicing area for our thing, especially for the instrument flying practices. And in instrument flying practice, ladies and gentlemen, what aircraft normally do is we do a climbing turn and descending turn that while you are climbing, you are turning also, and then you are descending and turning also. So these kind of maneuvers or practices are carried out over there. When this Atlantic was doing these kind of practices over there, and because it was on a practice navigation mission, there were extra crew on board, officers and sailors, because for training purposes, so that there could be more people could be trained. When they were carrying out these kind of operations, this Gharo area is very close to the route for the international traffic coming to Karachi airport also. So when there is heavy traffic on this route coming into the Karachi area, so the Karachi International ATC asked this aircraft to shift eastward because of the traffic. And it did, unsuspecting of anything that will happen. And it was well within our area. And it was carrying out these instrument flying practices, climbing and descending turns, etc., which they have said that it has been operating in this area for a very long time. Sometimes it was climbing, sometimes it was descending. Of course it was climbing and descending. And this maneuver, for any aviator, he would understand that what kind of this maneuver is going on. So that is where, unsuspectedly, that Indian aircraft shot down Atlantic. And so that was the only incident that happened, and that was after Kargil, not during Kargil. So they boast a lot, and not really everything is factual. I think there was some first part also from Granizal.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It was about PSI.
Offered to India to join the Proliferation Security Initiative.
I am not aware of whether Americans offered them or not. But as you can see, whatever way we negotiated with the Americans and the others, that when we became part of CMCP and we became part of Task Force 150 and 151, India was not allowed to join their sources. So the practical on ground, you can see that how we negotiated and how it took place. So whether they were offered separately, I'm not aware of.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I will take one question from audience here. Eelam.
I'm Hafiz Inam. I have a question regarding Russian Navy being part of this Aman exercise. I think this is the first time Russian Navy is participating in Aman exercise. So, as you all know, that the ice between Pakistan and Russia is already melting, and Pakistan and Russia are both collaborating with each other, especially with regards to, I think, intra-Afghan dialogue process as well. Also, we are part of SCO now. So now Russian Navy is coming to our waters. So what would be the impact of Russian Navy being part of this exercise for the whole region as well as for Pakistan?
It is very nice that the Russian Navy is coming. Of course, they will benefit and so will we. Apart from the actual participation of the Russian Navy, physical participation, it gives a very clear signal to the region that now Russia considers Pakistan to be their friendly terms are growing, and of course only those countries participate who have good relations with any other country. But it will be a good experience for the Russians also. I have very little experience of operating with the Russian ship. Again, in a similar scenario, I think it was 97, the South Africans had their 75 years of celebration, Navy celebrations. And two of our ships participated. I was commanding Babar then, and Babar was one of the ships. And then, as it was explained by Admiral Asaf Humayun, that when various navies, they come together and then they operate together, there are a lot of difficulties also. Interoperability, procedures are different, language is different, speeds, so many other things. So it was quite an experience operating with the Russians out at sea. So it will be a good experience for us and a good experience for them, apart from the political message that it will give a very positive message to the world, I think.
If I can just add to this, there are two co-jointed events with the Aman exercise. One is the Aman exercise, and then with the same there is an international maritime conference, because the same delegates of different countries which come here, they join together in the International Maritime Conference here. So when we say the Russian Navy is joining, the Russian Navy participation has been there as individuals. Russian naval officers have come in the previous Aman to attend the International Maritime Conference, but this would be the first time that their ships will actually take part in the exercise. So I think that should be clear.
One minute. We have one guest with us, Khurram Mirza Saab, Executive Director, Pakistan National Shipping Corporation. Sir, all this exercise is being done to ensure that your seas are safe for your trade. Okay, now the next question is coming from Mirza Hamid Hassan. Sir, please.
Well, thank you very much. I must compliment IPS for organizing this very informative and very educative seminar. I have a point regarding one of the remarks made or suggestions made by one of our eminent speakers about Pakistan playing as a sort of peacemaker between rival forces or acting as a mediator between rival forces in their rivalry on the seas or in the maritime area. Now, this sounds a very good idea, of course, to be acting a mediator, but Pakistan is a small power as compared to other big powers who are operating in this area. And I would particularly refer to the situation with regard to the Gwadar port, where we have our vital national interests resting in that port and the developments that are taking place in that area. And there are rival powers operating to thwart that project. Now, I wonder if it is possible for Pakistan to remain sort of neutral between those forces or those parties who are playing a game of rivalry in this situation. Pakistan has to be an active participant in this case, and Pakistan has to counter their efforts of the forces that are trying to thwart this project, and Pakistan has to side with the forces that are helping us and that are on our side. So it's very difficult to play a role of mediator in other areas if we are playing an active role defending our national interest in this area. I would like to have a comment on this from our eminent speakers.
So sometimes small powers can do that, and we have done that in the 70s when we brought China and United States close together. And for a good part of our diplomatic life of Pakistan, Pakistan has been able to create that balance between these two powers. At the moment, I think personally, geopolitically, Pakistan is in a position where it can play that role very critically. But not by, the term neutral is slightly misleading, I think. What we need to do is to define our own national interests and follow our national interests. So that would mean probably swinging to either side depending on our national interests, not taking sides as proxies the way we have been doing it, but once people know that we are not on one side, then both parties would probably be able to listen to our advice, would probably like to take us as a neutral party and respect our sovereignty. I think that is what he meant when he said that Pakistan should act as a bridge. So yes, it's difficult under the given geopolitical scenario, but not impossible. If we can put our own house in order, if we can understand our own national interests and stick with them, then we should be able to do that.
Thank you.
Now I would request Sir Khalid Rahman to conclude the event.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let me share my feeling that we had a very productive 2-hour session. Thanks to all our speakers as well as chairman of the session. In fact, Iftikhar Rao Sahab is one of those resource persons from whom we have benefited a lot in developing our understanding in this maritime sector. He was perhaps the first speaker at IPS sometimes in 2008 or 9 when he delivered a talk at IPS, and we then later published it in Policy Perspectives also. So that was the time we started our focus on this maritime sector. So I'm really grateful to you. Also to Dr. Maliha. In fact, she is the force behind this whole activity today. She is associated with the IPS as a non-resident fellow, and her area of focus is maritime. So inshallah, we shall be contributing a lot in the coming days. And of course, we shall be troubling you again and again. Why did we hold this seminar on Aman exercises? I feel, and this has been presented very eloquently by speakers here, that success and failures are part of life, human life. Be it is an individual's life or any collective entity, including the nations and countries. And what happened in Pakistan lately, that we are very fond of criticizing ourselves. We don't talk our successes. Rather, we try to say something which may be negative. And we thought this Aman exercise is one of those things which we need to really talk, because this is a success story of Pakistan. So, in this particular age of hybrid war, this is one of those things which, in fact, we need to highlight not only for the outside world, but even inside Pakistan. And I think there is a lot of room. This time we find some focus on these exercises in media. There have been articles, there have been webinars, seminars also. But still, I don't think many people would be knowing about it, that what is happening and how many countries are participating in it. So there are several messages that this success story is giving. And I would like to point out some of them. One is that while Navy is supposed to be a security organization, and it is, and in that sense, we are ready to face every challenge that is presented to the Navy. But our message is of peace. So when we merge them together, that this is a security arena, but we are talking of peace, this gives a message to the world that how much we are interested in the peace in the region as well as in the world. In that way, it is a kind of maritime diplomacy. And again, when we look at the hybrid nature of war, diplomacy is needed in every aspect of life. And this is a maritime diplomacy. With so many countries participating in the exercise, it is clear that our adversaries are not successful in isolating Pakistan, as they say, and as many of us try to, in fact, repeat it in different ways, that we have become isolated. And this has happened. I mean, these number of countries are participating in spite of the environment that has been so much affected by this COVID-19. So this needs to be recognized and highlighted. I think this exercise started in 2007, as you mentioned, and as our former associate and a very close friend Asif Humayun pointed out, that he was one of those. In fact, yes, he was the commander of the first time. So this exercise continuing every 2 years and progressing, it reflects consistency, not only of the event, but the theme also. So that is also a point that needs to be highlighted. As has been discussed and pointed out, इसकी ज़रूरत नहीं, कौन कर रही है, कोई ज़रूरत नहीं. As has been discussed and pointed out, it's a platform that we are providing to the giants in the world. And as was discussed, Russia is also joining this time. So this is a message of success that these exercises are. And of course, when they are meeting, they have an opportunity to interact with each other, to learn from each other, and to find out ways for collaboration. And this is going to be a great, I should say, contribution in the overall regional stability as well as global stability. And I would also repeat what has been said, that these exercises are not targeting anyone. These are just for cooperation, and when we say it is for peace, if it is targeting the non-traditional security threats. Just connecting to what I commented, that not many people are aware of these kind of successes, I think we should need to focus on at least three things. Aman exercises will be over within February. So what is going to be the follow-up? Follow-up in terms of narrative that these exercises are providing us, and that has to be projected all over the world, and also at the local level. And that point, Shabana, that you mentioned about the name of the Indian Ocean, I think this has been a mistake on our part also while we were titling this session. We need to focus on the alternative names, and there has been an exercise which has been recognized by many people, that we need to, in our narrative, in our discussions, we need to go for Afro-Asian Ocean rather than insisting on Indian Ocean. So that is, I think, one major point of follow-up. And of course, just repeating, success stories need to be shared and highlighted again and again. So these are the thoughts that I had in mind while concluding this. But as I said earlier, we are not going to end this discussion here. Inshallah, we shall have some follow-up sessions also to continue this particular theme and to provide a support to all those who want to project Pakistan as a peaceful country, which it is, and to remove those misconceptions that are projected about us from our adversaries. So thank you again, and we look forward to more sessions.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, before ending this session, I would request Sir Iftikhar Ahmad Rao to present his book to Dr. Shabana Fayaz and Dr. Azhar Ahmad sir. And after that, we will have one group photo, please.